Part 2 of our deep dive into Bethenny Frankel. In part 1, we basically talked about her divorce, everything leading up to it, and now we are post Jason, thank fucking God. Now I want to get back to where we were. This is after the filming of the show Bethenny Ever After, which I believe lasted for 2 seasons. At this point, Bethenny was granted a daytime talk show, so they were just throwing fucking shows at Bethenny. Like I said, she's an it girl at this time. Like, anything that they can give her, that will stick. They can guarantee ratings, and she had a cult following of middle America white women who loved Bethenny Frankel. So her talk show Bethenny aired in 2012. In my opinion, this is kind of where some of the audience started to dislike Bethenny. Some sources say Bethenny had a really hard time connecting with the audience, which I believe, because although Bethenny has always come off as really relatable, I don't think she's approachable. You know, she's not relatable in the sense like, you know, me and Bethenny, like, that's my girl next door. Like I said, she's still a socialite. She's still up here and we're down here, to quote Kelly Cloran Ben-Simone. And there's an amazing clip of Omarosa completely demolishing Bethenny, which I have to include.
Different for you and I. I'm an African-American woman. You get to walk around and be mediocre and you still get rewarded with things. We have to be exceptional to get anything in this business. I wasn't calling her mediocre.
I don't think you have anything to show.
I worked in the White House. Get a grip.
What's your brand?
I'd like you to tell us what. I am a strong businesswoman.
She wasn't a good fit for a daytime talk show because she's known in New York for her quick, kind of dark humor. It's very sarcastic and it's very dry. And daytime talk show, it's like light and it's airy, it's formulaic, and Bethenny has said like she did not like that formula and that format at all. But honestly, I think the show was just doomed from the jump because she had produced it with Ellen DeGeneres. But regardless, Bethenny had a cult following, and the show went on to produce 185 episodes before it was eventually canceled because it did have pretty low ratings. And overall, looking back at it, this was a very random move in my opinion, and it just doesn't really make sense. It's not really on brand with Bethenny and like her persona, because I don't see Bethenny as like a journalist. And then in 2014, Bethenny came back to The Real Housewives of New York for season 7 in an episode titled The Bee is Back, which was kind of funny because Bethenny had never really left our screens. She went, filmed 2 spinoffs and a talk show, and then she came back. But this was still a very important moment for The Real Housewives of New York because they were bringing back an OG cast member. Like I said, she was a fan favorite. People were very excited to see her back mixing with the ladies. And the dynamics had shifted. Things had changed. Bethenny had blown up, sold her company, got married, got divorced, had a kid, and now she's here. You know, so she wasn't like kind of the young runt that she was on the first season of New York. Another thing is with Bethenny being such an it girl, she was also paid a lot more than the other women. And it was rumored that Bethenny was paid almost $1 million for her return, which I don't know if I believe that. Like, Bravo has money, but do they have money for like NFL type of fucking contracts for Bethenny Frankel for 1 season? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. No idea, but that sounds like a lot. But I believe that Bethenny was paid more because when Bethenny comes back, at this point, she's really in with the Bravo network. She knows all the producers well from her 3 different shows. Carol even alleged that Bethenny has been in producer group chats when they were filming, so she was more in on the information and had a hand in like setting scenes to go in her favor. It had also really upset Sonia, Ramona, and Luann because they had been on the show for longer, more consecutive time and felt like they deserved a pay rate that resembled that. A lot of the women were jealous of her, whether or not they wanted to admit it. This was a really hard time for Bethenny to be filming. I don't mean to seem like a Bethenny apologist, but like with her having split custody of Brynn, she wasn't allowed to film with Brynn. She was going through a huge legal battle with her ex-husband, who wasn't even her ex-husband yet, and she was having health issues. It was a whole thing. And her whole storyline this season was that Bethenny was kind of unhoused, as you could say, because I think Jason was trying to keep the apartment that they had bought together. She was living in a bunch of different hotels. She was just very chaotic at this time because her and her daughter were just bouncing around from really nice hotels, and all of her scenes were like shot in different taxi cabs instead of living rooms. And she did not give any time of day to the newbies. She was not interested in getting to know them. She was only interested in filming if it was like about her, and then she would come in, maybe stir some shit with the other woman, but that was pretty much it. Bethenny was also very emotionally fragile at this time. She would just like randomly burst into tears a lot. In the past, like before Bethenny came back, she was always more like the calm, rational, and direct one. And now she's a lot more like unbalanced and unpredictable and just very much all over the place, which was obviously a sign of what she was going through legally and within her family. But some people did get frustrated because it was confusing why Bethenny wanted to return if she didn't really want to make any time to get to know the other women and like actually develop friendships, because even though she was filming again with Ramona, Luann, and Sonia, blah blah blah, like you could tell it was she's coming to film and then she's leaving. Like they don't spend time together over the summer. They don't go and get dinner together. Like Bethenny is very much cut in, cut out. That was until Carol Radswell. Bethenny and Carol, a match made in heaven. Bethenny and Carol became friends, I believe around season 8, and this was kind of Bethenny's first friendship that we really saw form on camera. And even though Bethenny had been on her screen for almost 10 years, Carol was the person that she seemed actually to be the closest with out of all of this time. Carol was also kind of a fan favorite on Real Housewives of New York. She was very likable, she was more down to earth, she wasn't as flashy as the other women, but she still kind of had some New York heiress energy to her. And Carol kind of made Bethenny a lot more palatable, a lot more likable. She kind of brought Bethenny down a few notches, which was really needed at the time because, like I said, she was just all over the fucking place. And so when Bethenny and Carol had a falling out, I believe in season 10 or 11 of Real Housewives of New York, people were really upset. And this is also when Bethenny started to lose a lot of fans because people who really liked Carol tended to stick with Carol's side. The reason why Bethenny and Carol had a falling out is largely disputed. Like, Bethenny and Carol would never really agree on one specific incident that caused their friendship to fall apart, other than like the election year, but Carol was super passionate and would not stop talking about it, which definitely annoyed Bethenny because I'm pretty sure Bethenny is a Republican. And Carol, as we know, is like a hardcore Democrat. Bethenny just doesn't really put time into investing into other people. I think she expects friendships to be all about what people are pouring into her, if they're checking in on her, and I don't see Bethenny as being somebody to like, how are you? Like, haven't heard from you a little bit, just want to make sure you're okay. Like, I think you could go months from not hearing from Bethenny. Okay, chapter 4. We are now in chapter 4. This is the belittling Bravo Bethenny era. After season 11 of Real Housewives of New York, Bethenny announced that she was leaving the cast, and essentially she immediately turned her back on the entire network and the entire cast and started bashing everybody online. And it was a major like, don't bite the hand that feeds you type of a moment. Because I want to remind everybody that Bethenny's whole empire was built on the Bravo audience. Like, the skinny girl target audience was the same as the Bravo Real Housewives audience. So people bought into both. And I just don't think her brand would have been nearly as successful if she didn't have that platform that aired her business once a week, and she didn't even have to fucking give a profit to. She didn't have to fucking cut a check to Bravo for it. So it's like, what are you complaining about? What are you complaining about, Bethenny? You got out of that. You had it easy. You were the fan favorite. People loved you. I want to hear from Deborah. I want to hear from Katie Roast. I'll hear from Bronwyn. People who were like actually cancelable. But Bethenny's just annoying. I think at some point during COVID, Bethenny was just sitting there. I can't imagine Bethenny quarantining. I can just imagine just going fucking nuts. Poor Brynn. I'm gonna try to leave her out of this. She's been through enough. I think this is kind of when she started plotting and scheming and reflecting on her time as Housewives and found a way to make it really, really negative. And then in 2022, she announced that she was gonna start a podcast called Rewives, in which she would be rewatching and recapping episodes over Housewives of New York and kind of giving her opinion on it, as well as like insider information. But basically this was just like her talking shit. And honestly, it is kind of confusing because she has another podcast called Just Be, and she talks about Real Housewives on both of them, so I don't really understand the differentiation between Just Be and Rewives, but whatever. She was constantly bad-mouthing Bravo on it, Andy as a person, and the whole Housewives franchise. And then right after she announced her new podcast, she went on an episode of Watch What Happens Live in December of 2022 with Jeff Lewis and obviously Andy Cohen. As far as like identifying where the recent tension between Andy and Bethenny comes from, I think you can very much point it down to this episode of Watch What Happens Live because it is so fucking tense. Also, this episode is still on Peacock, so you should definitely watch it. Jeff Lewis being there definitely doesn't help, or maybe it does. I don't know. It's honestly hilarious, but it's very, very awkward because Andy confronts Bethenny about her starting a new podcast and how it's ironic that she's starting a podcast about Housewives when she's been publicly bashing the whole franchise for the last several years. And she's like, oh, well, you know me, I have thoughts about it. I've thoughts about this. I've thoughts about that. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to share my thoughts with everybody, blah, blah, blah. And that was basically her defense of it. In March of 2023, she actually pitched a show to Bravo that would follow rich families in Connecticut. And I think it's important to know that she did want to include kids in this casting. In July of 2003, she announced that she was going to do this whole reality beckoning movement. The idea was that it would be done in tandem with the writers' strike and the actors' strikes that were already happening over the summer of 2023. So writers and actors were striking for better residuals, better pay raises, better working conditions, and Bethenny was like, well, reality stars should be included in this movement as well. At the surface level, like, I really don't disagree with that, but this is just one of those examples of Bethenny just not being able to sit still. She can't just not do things. She gets an idea. She actually came up with this idea on the episode of her podcast that she did with Jill Zarin. And they came up with the whole phrase reality reckoning and blah, 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 blah. But she gets these ideas and then she has to do them. She has to do them huge, large scale. It can't just be a small, minor, oh, let's start with Bravo. Let's start with Housewives of New York. Let's get them little residuals. It's got to be huge, major takedown. She has to be the face of it. It's got to be a whole fucking thing. Like, she can't just sit still. So this is kind of how she put herself at the forefront of these anti-Bravo propaganda installments, you know, alongside fellow disgruntled employees. Like, she really did not align herself well with other people. In this movement, which she mainly lays out on her podcast, she also calls for a union for reality stars to protect their working conditions. Bethenny basically argues that reality stars are like the least protected group of TV talent, and I can see why, because they're essentially like bottom of the barrel. And that's very interesting because nowadays reality shows are like the most popular things. That's what most people watch. Overall, like, she's not wrong. The whole premise of this idea isn't wrong. I don't disagree that people should be getting better residuals, that people should be protected and represented with a union. Like, those are all great things, but it's just the way she goes about it. She has to shove her own accolades down everyone else's throat to remind us that she is the exception. So she's quoted saying, I'm the exception, not the rule. Me making money is because I'm extremely smart and knew what I was dealing with and grew up on the racetrack. This was designed for me because I have more than I could ever want. This is for the girl who gets paid $7,000 a season and says something that she regrets and has to watch on television and on t-shirts and on YouTube for the rest of her natural born life and makes no money from it. So it's just annoying. You could say that she's like, I'm rallying for these people, but like, that couldn't be me. Like, I got paid $1 million whenever I came back, you know, like, I didn't sign the Bethenny clause. Like, I'm smarter than everybody. I'm the exception to being hurt by reality TV because I'm Bethenny Frankel. And she really took umbrage with the narrative that Bravo puts people in vulnerable positions when they're filming these shows. I don't know if that's necessarily wrong, but I think it's wrong to say that adults don't go into that knowing that that's how this works. Like, you sign contracts. Her idea is that she thinks reality stars are little incompetent monkey babies who can't speak for themselves, who are gonna go and just fart and say slurs on TV and don't know how to read a contract. They don't. Like, most people who go on reality shows, they know what they're getting into. Like, we're not fucking idiots. And she's just like, these little babies, they need someone to help them because they're gonna go on TV and they're gonna say something stupid. It's like, I hope they do. That's what I need to see. Like, people have no autonomy. They have no power. People have seen reality shows before by now. Like, they know what they're getting into. She has also tried to say that producers were feeding people with alcohol and like encouraging them to drink more. And I'm fucking sorry, but The Real Housewives of New York, actually no Real Housewives ever need anyone to encourage them to drink. They do that on their own free will. Their own free will. They probably drink even more when they're not on camera. Next thing we know, so she's announced this whole thing on a little podcast. She's doing TikToks, which is going to be a whole segment at the end of the video about specifically designated to TikTok. It's August 2023, and she has Rachel Leviss on her podcast, Rewives or Just Be. I honestly don't remember which podcast it was, but this was a huge deal because Rachel was fresh out of the meadows. This was her first public appearance post-Scandival, post-treatment, and she decides to team up with Bethenny Frankel, which was a really, really big deal because for context, I mean, Rachel was on Vanderpump Rules, which I know is a big deal now, but like it really wasn't. They were like bottom of the Bravo totem pole, which is the bottom of all of entertainment. So for Rachel to get Bethenny, who's this big powerhouse, you know, a millionaire woman in the Hamptons, to kind of take her side, give her a platform and a place to speak, like that was major. But that was also a super controversial move because people were not happy with Rachel for deciding to be a mistress in the Tom Sandoval, Ariana Madix relationship. And Bethenny really took the stance of defending Rachel a lot throughout this episode, which was a very interesting choice. My understanding of the episode, which I did listen to all 3 parts, so you're welcome, was that Bethenny was trying to use Rachel's experience of, you know, being in an affair and then having to go into therapy as like evidence for her case against Bravo. Anything that Rachel would say, Bethenny would try to kind of reword it and make it fit the language that Bethenny was using because Bethenny's big on specific language. You know, she's very Trumpian in that way. She's got to say reality reckoning and it's got to be, you know, branded and copyrighted. She's trying to be like, oh, Rachel, like the producers are the ones who made you do this. They were the ones who told you to get into relationships. They were the ones who encouraged you to drink more. And then Rachel's like, yeah, like, I guess when you say it like that, like, I guess they did. And it's like, bitch, like, stop. Leave Rachel alone. She's a vulnerable woman. And it's just so manipulative of you to be like capitalizing on this woman and her traumatic story just to have like views. You know, Bethenny, I guess, defended this move by saying that she was trying to give Rachel a platform to tell her story and share her side. But in my opinion, Rachel was literally the talk of the entire universe and she could have gone on any platform and it would have had 1 million views. She could have gone on my podcast and it would have been viral. Like, it did not matter. It was very opportunistic and very meta in the sense that Bethenny is like this huge reality TV mogul, and here she is cashing in on Rachel's story. Because it was rumored that she did not pay Rachel to be on this podcast. And one of the major concepts that they talked about on the podcast was the fact that Rachel did not get paid a lot of money to be on the last season of Vanderpump Rules. She was like, oh, that's fucked up. Like, they should be paying you a ton of money. And then she pays her nothing to be on this really, really important podcast that everyone listened to. Like, I never listened to Bethenny's podcast, but I listened to that one because I needed to hear what the fuck Rachel had to say. And so people were quick to call out the irony, like, Bethenny, here you are campaigning for residuals. Did you give Rachel residuals on this episode? Were you going to fight for residuals on the show that you just pitched literally 3 months ago to Bravo? I don't think so. Now it's a problem. As soon as you hear that Vanity Fair is writing an article trying to expose all of reality TV, oh, now you want to get your ducks in a row and try to be the leader. You want to be the forefront. I'm sure Bethenny made a lot of money from 3 different 60-minute episodes that have like 20 minutes of ads each. And sure enough, in October of 2023, Vanity Fair releases a long-form expose article called Inside the Reality Reckoning, and Bethenny was like the leader, forefront, lead girl. The article didn't just focus on Bethenny. It also included Leah McSweeney and Ebony Williams, who are both Real Housewives of New York. If you're going to write a huge controversial article about a franchise that people absolutely adore, you better come with some fan favorites backing up your stance. Because to come with Leah and Ebony and be like, look, Leah, Ebony, and Bethenny, look, that's our crew, that's our team. Were Leah and Ebony really the first round picks for this takedown of Bravo? Like, it's just really random considering all of the options. Like, they have no fans. And at this time, Bethenny really didn't either. It didn't really help fans get behind this movement, let me just say. The article included a lot of valid points about Ebony's experience being the first Black woman on the Housewives of New York, but a lot of Leah's quotes were just about her drinking, her binge drinking on Bravo, which she blamed Bravo for. And the whole thing just didn't really sit well with Bravo fans, obviously. If you're gonna come and tell me that you have a long-form expose in the works, I expect to learn something. And there was no new information coming out of this article except for the stuff from Ebony, in my opinion. Like, everything else I pretty much knew. So after she left the Real Housewives of New York and before she started her podcast, she started a career as a TikToker. Bethenny is now a TikTok girly, and that has been honestly probably a good form of income for her for the last few years. And she does a lot of different makeup things. She likes to do what people call middle class role play, where she goes to Olive Garden and Dollar Trees and other middle class staple establishments and evaluates their customer service, and gives a scathing review. The whole thing's weird. It's really weird. If you haven't seen them, they're weird. There's probably a compilation somewhere on YouTube of all of her TikToks. It's just strange. It's literally her trying like Olive Garden fettuccine alfredo and being like, this is fucking good. Like, let me fucking tell you, like, whoever said it's not good, it's good. And it's like $8.99, $8.99. Right here, $8.99. Her TikToks have gotten her into a lot of other controversies. There was one video where she tried to give her used makeup to different employees at a TJ Maxx because she was like, oh, like, they can't afford this kind of stuff. Like, this is what she was saying in the video. She's like, they need it. They can't afford it. Like, here I am doing a service. And obviously people were like, hey, that's really not necessary. First of all, why are you giving them used makeup? Secondly, why are you posting about it? Like, fucking congratulations. And the whole thing was just really strange. And then Carol, who is Bethenny's ex-best friend, responded in a tweet, said that Bethenny has a white savior complex. And I'm using that in quotations because I believe that is partially true. Now, Bethenny does have a charity called Be Strong. I would feel wrong not talking all this shit about Bethenny and not at least talking about her charity, because she started this charity and it actually does a lot of really good things. Focused on providing relief aid for natural disasters mainly and other type of crises. So she did a lot of work on the hurricanes in Puerto Rico and in Houston, and then also raising money for relief in Ukraine. So I do have to say there's a lot of good work that has been done there, but Bethenny definitely does have a white savior complex. And I feel like that's why she wants to be the head of this whole reality reckoning movement, because she wants to be the one who can say, I saved the day. I'm the one who fought for the troops, who rallied, like it was me. And she also has this narrative in her head that she's the only one who can do that. She's like, I'm the exception. I'm the only one. There are other few random examples of celebrities talking poorly about Bethenny that I would love to mention. Like Martha Stewart went on Bethenny's talk show.
Know what you were feeling, because I felt like you didn't like me, to be honest with you.
Well, you weren't so likable then.
You weren't. That's what I want to hear.
No, you weren't. You were a pest. You were a pest. She was.
Or when Jennifer Lawrence said that she's not actually a chef. And never forget whenever they mentioned Bethenny in Just Like That promo, which was truly a sign of the times.
I almost rented a house in the Hamptons 6 times, but I always found a reason not to.
Was that reason always Bethenny Frankel?
Haha.
I also want to include a quick compilation of Bethenny giving her opinion on things that literally have nothing to do about her. Another example of, please take a break, 18-month cruise, you can afford it, make me miss you. As far as other controversial things that Bethenny has done, there's a few instances where she's tried to pose in her children's clothing. One time where she posed in her 4-year-old daughter's outfit, and yes, she did fit in the clothing, and she posted the photos, I believe, on Facebook. The whole thing was just really gross, especially considering that there's an eating disorder that runs in her family on her mom's side, and she has this whole skinny girl brand. People were like, what are you doing to poor Bryn? Like, she's gonna see her 43-year-old mother wearing her 4-year-old clothing and be like, what? Why? Why can you fit in that? That's weird. It's also like a real read the room situation, because people have always criticized Bethenny for being too skinny. I don't really like to get into criticizing people's bodies. Like, I feel like that's not my space here. But she's definitely could have done a better job of like not leaning into that so hard, or I don't know, not starting an empire on being skinny. In 2015, she also said she was going to do a line of skinny girl marijuana, which this is so annoying. Bethenny, if she ever comes anywhere close, I already hate her. We're done. We're done. I'm gonna be pissed. Essentially, she wanted skinny girl weed to not give you the munchies. Someone who has never smoked before, like, that's something that you would say. Like, you would think that every time someone smokes, they're like, wah, 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 chowing down on the cord. Like, it's not like that. Like, calm down. And then in 2018, at peak body positivity movement, Bethenny decides that she's going to do a line of skinny girl jeggings. And I just love that she misses the mark every single time, because in 2018, first of all, nobody was wearing jeggings. Secondly, no one's definitely not wearing skinny girl jeggings. Read the fucking room. Skinny girl jeggings sounds uncomfortable as fuck. And then here are some other controversies that she's been in that are a little bit hard for me to include in the regular timeline. In 2016, she spoke at a woman business conference and she was trying to be snarky and quippy. She was speaking to a crowd of predominantly Black women and she tried to compare herself to Black women by saying that she too is loud. So obnoxious of Bethenny. And she suggested that women of color make white men the face of their business in order to go further and to accomplish more. Which I understand the premise of what she's saying. It's like, you gotta play their game a little bit, but how discouraging. You're at a woman in business conference. And like, Bethenny, that's not what you did. Unless you're talking about Jason, that elf on a shelf. It came across as like trying to minimize women in business, specifically Black women in business. Bethenny has also publicly slammed Ozempic. I think it's just really ironic and obnoxious because she has earned herself $100 million off of encouraging people to be skinny. So I'm sorry that we found a medication that gives people that outcome without having to buy your low calorie, low carb, low sugar margaritas and your skinny girl jeggings. Like, you're just mad that this is taking money from you, taking money out of your pocket and giving it to something that actually works rather than your saltless popcorn. Just annoying as fuck. I can't stand that. Someone who's been skinny her whole life, shaming people for finding a medication that works and cures the largest disease in America, being obese. I thought you promoted skinniness. I thought you loved it. I thought we loved it. She also is really all about not filtering people. She's very hypocritical, right? I don't know if I've said that already, but she's very hypocritical. So she's always talking about, no, you shouldn't filter your stuff online. Don't edit your photos. But again, you're one of the people who promoted skinniness for 15 years. Like, you're one of the reasons why people Photoshop their pictures, right? It's because of this expectation that you've put out for years. This expectation that you should be 43 and be able to fit into your 4-year-old daughter's clothing. Yeah, I'm gonna edit my teeth. I'm gonna slim it down a little bit. So that is basically the whole timeline of Bethenny's rise and fall from grace in the Bravo sphere and what brought her from running a really respectable, I guess, business at the time to now doing weird shellfish mukbangs on TikTok Live, which we have to end on that note. So thank you for joining me on my first YouTube video. This is kind of like an experimental thing. I might have to change how I go about editing and shooting these, and I'm definitely open to suggestions on how I can make this look better and just be a better experience for everybody. But make sure you subscribe to me here because, like I said, who knows, we could wake up tomorrow and not have TikTok. Thank God the government moves slow. We move fast. We move quicker over here at SaltBitch34 platform. So make sure you follow me here and on TikTok. And yeah, let me know who you guys would love to see a deep dive on next.